Hello and welcome to another A-Level Economics video with me, Mr Goff, from MrGoff.com. This video will focus on the purpose of government intervention. The government attempts to intervene in markets to prevent or reduce the effects of market failure. Three key methods the government uses to intervene to prevent market failure are indirect taxation, subsidies, and maximum and minimum pricing. We'll take a look at each of these in more detail now to see what they're trying to achieve. Indirect taxes can be used to increase the price of goods and services that have negative externalities. If we take a look at this example here, we can see that the market level of production is found at Q1 P1, whereas the socially optimum level is at Q2 P2. To be effective, an indirect tax should be imposed for the difference between the marginal social cost and the marginal private cost at the socially optimum level of production. So that's the difference between the price at P2 and the price at P3. Where the negative externality increases as consumption increases, then an ad valorem tax is most appropriate. Stamp duty is an example of an ad valorem tax. It is charged as a percentage of the price of a house that you're going to buy. That percentage rises as the cost of the house rises, and it's also 3% more if you're buying a second home than if you're buying your primary home. Where the negative externality is the same for each additional unit consumed, a specific tax is most appropriate. Alcohol is charged a specific tax where we pay a certain number of pounds for each litre of pure alcohol in the product. In fact, alcohol and cigarettes actually both have both specific and ad valorem taxes because they're both also subject to VAT. The benefits of indirect taxation are the increase in the price of goods should naturally lead to lower levels of consumption, and where the increase in price is less effective in reducing consumption, for example, when demand is inelastic, such as for tobacco and alcohol, then larger amounts of money are raised in taxes that can be used to offset the negative externalities caused by the products themselves. Some of the problems with indirect taxation include it's tough to gauge the right amount of tax needed because the problem is difficult to judge, and it's also hard to know exactly how people will respond to new taxes. Taxes are also a source of revenue for the government, so there may be conflicts between the desire to achieve the socially optimal output levels and the desire to raise more money. Taxes may not be spent on reducing the associated negative externalities. In the first year of the UK's sugar tax on sugary drinks, the funds that were raised were applied to combating the UK's obesity epidemic, but subsequently these were subsumed into normal tax revenues, something that disappoints many of the people who originally campaigned for it. Rising taxes is also generally unpopular with voters, so it's difficult for governments to do this, even when it might be appropriate. In some cases, indirect taxes can have unintended consequences. Since the UK imposed indirect taxes on the use of landfill sites with the aim of trying to improve the level of recycling that was going on, the unintended consequence has been a significant increase in fly tipping. Subsidies can be used to decrease the price of goods and services with positive externalities. If we take a look at this example, the market level of production would be at Q1 P1. But the socially optimal level of production is at Q2 P2. To be effective, the subsidy given should be the difference between the marginal social benefit, that's at P2, and the marginal private benefit, P3, at the socially optimal level of production. Subsidies lower prices and encourage the use of goods that reduce negative externalities, for example, public transport and electric vehicles, which both reduce pollution. They also promote the consumption of goods with positive externalities, for example, education. Subsidies can be used to help emerging industries become established and achieve the economies of scale they need to be competitive. The UK gives large subsidies to the offshore wind farm industry in order to help this industry develop into one of the world leaders so that we can reap the benefits of it in the future. Some of the problems with subsidies include: it's tough to gauge the right amount of subsidy needed because it's difficult to assess the problem and also to gauge exactly what the reaction will be to a subsidy being applied. If the government pays for subsidies, it reduces the amount of money that they have to spend elsewhere, so some people will doubtless disagree with their priorities. Subsidies can lead to producers becoming inefficient and reliant upon the subsidy. The quality of locally produced subsidised goods may not be as good as those that could be imported. And removing subsidies can be politically damaging. In Nigeria in 2023, attempts to remove the fuel subsidy led to widespread protests across the entire country. Minimum pricing sets an absolute minimum that a product can be sold for. If we set the minimum price below the equilibrium price, there would be no effect. When we set it above the equilibrium price, as we can see in this example below, we can see that demand would fall from Q0 to Q1, and supply would rise from Q0 to Q2, leaving us in a position of oversupply. While minimum pricing does raise the price of products, it does not raise additional money for the government. The Scottish Government implemented minimum pricing on units of alcohol, raising the price of some of the cheapest alcohol, particularly large bottles of cider. This does make the cider cost more money, but does not raise any money for dealing with the problems caused by alcohol. Maximum pricing sets the maximum price a good or service can be sold for. If the maximum price were above the market equilibrium, this would have no effect. But where we set a maximum price below market equilibrium, as we can see in this example here, supply shifts from Q0 to Q1 and demand from Q0 to Q2, leaving us in a position of excess demand. Because of this position, it is likely that black markets may develop for the sale of these goods. Maximum pricing is one solution that's been offered to high-priced ticket resales for concerts. However, there's no promise that if we implemented a system where you couldn't resell a ticket for more than its face value, that this wouldn't lead to black markets where buyers of tickets would have even less rights and less safety. That brings us to the end of this video on the purpose of the main forms of government intervention to correct market failure. Join me in the next video when I'll be looking at more methods of government intervention to correct market failure. Use the resources at mrgoff.com to help you revise economics, and until next time, it's bye for now.